In a remote valley where mist clung to ancient pine trees like wisps of memory, there stood a monastery that had weathered countless seasons. The wooden beams had darkened with age, and the stone steps leading to the meditation hall bore the smooth grooves of 10,000 footsteps. This was the monastery of the quiet heart, and it was here that a young woman named Elena arrived one autumn morning, her heart heavy with grief. She had traveled for 3 days, leaving behind a city that no longer felt like home. 6 months earlier, her beloved grandmother had passed away, and shortly after, a relationship she'd thought would last forever had crumbled. Elena felt as though she were carrying stones in her chest, each breath and effort against their weight. The abbot who greeted her at the gate was an elderly man with eyes that seemed to hold both the depth of oceans and the lightness of clouds. His name was Master Rinzin, and he welcomed her without questions, as though he had been expecting her arrival. "The path to healing," he said simply, "begins with a single step. You have already taken it by coming here." Part 2. The first teaching, the parable of the 2 arrows. That evening, as Elena sat in the meditation hall struggling to quiet her turbulent thoughts, Master Rinzin told her an ancient story. The Buddha once asked his students, the master began, his voice gentle in the candlelit room, "If a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful?" "Of course," the students replied. "And if that person is struck by a second arrow, is it even more painful?" "Yes, much more so." Master Rinzin paused, letting the question settle in the air like dust motes in a beam of light. The Buddha taught that in life, we cannot always avoid the first arrow. These are the unavoidable pains: loss, disappointment, aging, illness. But the second arrow that we shoot at ourselves. The second arrow is our reaction to the pain, our anger at the unfairness, our fear of the future, our resistance to what is. Elena felt tears beginning to form. She realized she had been shooting herself with second arrows constantly, blaming herself for her grandmother's death, wondering what she could have done differently in her relationship, fearing that she would never feel whole again. "Your grandmother's passing was the first arrow," Master Rinzin said softly. "But your belief that you should have somehow prevented it, your guilt about the times you didn't visit, your fear that you'll forget her, these are all second arrows. Can you see the difference?" Elena nodded slowly, understanding blooming in her chest like a tentative flower. "The practice," the master continued, "is not to avoid pain, for that is impossible. The practice is to notice when we reach for the second arrow, and to gently put it down." Part 3. Days of Practice. In the weeks that followed, Elena settled into the rhythm of monastery life. She woke before dawn to the sound of bells, meditated in the hall with the other residents, worked in the gardens, and attended Master Rinzin's evening teachings. Each day felt like a stone being carefully lifted from her chest. One morning, while raking leaves in the courtyard, she met Brother Tenzo, the monastery's cook. He was a cheerful man in his 60s who hummed while he worked and always seemed to be smiling. "Brother Tenzo," Elena asked, "how are you always so happy? Haven't you experienced loss and pain?" The cook set down his basket of vegetables and looked at her with kind eyes. "Let me tell you about my teacher," he said. "Years ago, I studied under a great Zen master. One day, I learned that my entire family had died in a fire. I was devastated, destroyed. I went to my teacher, expecting comfort, expecting wisdom. What did he say?" Elena asked. "He said nothing. He simply handed me a bucket and asked me to fetch water from the well. I was angry, but I did it. Then he asked me to chop vegetables for dinner. Then to sweep the floor. Then to wash the dishes. Day after day, task after task. At first, I resented him. I thought he was heartless." Brother Tenzo smiled. "But slowly I began to understand. Grief cannot be solved, only lived through. And we live through it one moment at a time, one task at a time, one breath at a time. My teacher was showing me that life continues, that there is still purpose, still beauty, still work to be done. The pain was there, but so was the water, the vegetables, the floor. Both could exist together. Elena felt something shift within her. She had been waiting to stop grieving before she could live again, but perhaps that wasn't how it worked. Perhaps healing meant learning to carry the grief while still engaging fully with life. Part 4. The koan of the empty cup. One evening, Master Rinzin invited Elena to tea. They sat in his simple quarters, where a single scroll hung on the wall depicting a circle painted with one brushstroke, the Enso, symbol of enlightenment and the void. As Elena watched, the master filled her cup with tea until it began to overflow, spilling onto the table. "Master, the cup is full," Elena exclaimed. "No more will go in." Rinzin smiled and set down the teapot. "Like this cup, you are full. Full of sorrow, full of memories, full of ideas about how things should have been. Until you empty your cup, I cannot show you anything new." He paused, letting her absorb this. "Tell me, Elena, what are you holding on to?" The question landed like a key in a lock. Elena realized she was holding on to so many things. The idea that life should be fair, that love should last forever, that she could have prevented loss through better choices. She was holding on to an image of how her life was supposed to look, and reality had shattered that image. "How do I let go?" she whispered. "You don't force it," the master replied. "You simply notice what you're holding, acknowledge it with compassion, and when you're ready, you open your hands. Again and again. Letting go is not a single act but a continuous practice." Part 5. The story of the mustard seed. A few days later, as winter approached and the first snow began to fall, Master Rinzin shared another teaching during the evening gathering. "There was once a young mother named Kisa Garami," he began, "whose infant son died suddenly. Mad with grief, she carried the child's body from house to house, begging for medicine to revive him. Most people turned her away, thinking she had lost her mind. Finally, someone directed her to the Buddha. When she found him, she placed her dead child at his feet and begged for help. The Buddha looked at her with infinite compassion and said, 'I can help you, but first you must bring me a mustard seed from a household that has never known death.' Kisa Garami felt hope for the first time in days. She went from house to house throughout the village. But in every home she visited, she found that death had touched that family. A parent, a sibling, a spouse, a child. Every single household had experienced loss. As the sun set, Kisa Garami finally understood. She returned to the Buddha and said, 'I understand now. I thought I was alone in my suffering, but grief is the price we pay for love, and everyone who loves must eventually face loss.' The Buddha nodded. 'Yes, my child. The life of mortals in this world is troubled and brief and combined with pain. There is no means by which those who have been born can avoid dying. But in understanding that suffering is universal, we find connection. In connection we find compassion. And in compassion we find the path to peace.' Elena wept openly as the story ended, but these were different tears. Tears of recognition rather than despair. She was not alone in her pain. Every person in this monastery, every person in her city, every person in the world carried their own losses and griefs. This understanding didn't diminish her pain, but somehow it made it more bearable. Her suffering was not a personal failing but part of the shared human experience. Part 6. Working with the breath. Master Rinzin began teaching Elena a specific meditation practice. When difficult emotions arise, he instructed, don't try to push them away or fix them. Instead, breathe with them. Acknowledge them like old friends. Old friends? Elena questioned. But these feelings are painful. Yes, the master agreed. But they are also messengers. Your grief tells you how deeply you loved. Your fear tells you what you value. Your anger reveals what you believe is unjust. Listen to these messengers, honor them, but don't let them dictate your actions. He taught her a simple practice. Breathing in, I acknowledge this pain. Breathing out, I hold it with compassion. Breathing in, I recognize this is a moment of suffering. Breathing out, I offer myself kindness. Elena practiced this meditation daily. At first, it felt awkward and the pain seemed to intensify. But gradually, she noticed something remarkable. By turning toward her grief rather than running from it, by breathing with it rather than against it, the grief began to transform. It was still there, but it no longer consumed her. It became something she carried rather than something that carried her. Part 7. The Garden in Winter. As winter deepened, Elena found solace in the monastery garden. Though most plants had gone dormant, there was still work to be done. Protecting delicate roots, preparing beds for spring, maintaining the stone pathways. One afternoon, as she worked alongside Sister May, an elderly nun who tended the garden, Elena noticed several dead branches on a cherry tree. "Should we cut these away?" Elena asked. Sister May examined the branches carefully. "Not yet," she said. "In nature, there is wisdom in the cycle of death and renewal. These dead branches will protect the tree through winter. When spring comes, when new growth begins, then we will prune what is no longer needed." She looked at Elena meaningfully. Healing is like this. We cannot force the timeline. There is a season for everything. A season for grief, a season for quiet endurance, a season for pruning away old patterns, and a season for new growth. Trust the process. Elena stood in the snow-dusted garden, looking at the bare branches against the gray sky, and for the first time since her grandmother's death, she felt a flicker of hope. Spring would come. Not today, perhaps not even next month, but it would come. Part 8. The Teaching of Non-Attachment. One evening, Master Rinzin took Elena to the monastery's small shrine, where families left offerings for deceased loved ones. Candles flickered before photographs and tablets inscribed with names. Many people misunderstand Buddhist teachings about non-attachment, the master said. They think it means not loving, not caring. But this is wrong. Non-attachment doesn't mean loving less. It means loving wisely. He gestured to the photographs. To love someone is natural and beautiful. To grasp them, to demand they never change, to resist the truth of impermanence, this is what causes suffering. Can you love your grandmother's memory without needing her to be here? Can you cherish what you shared without demanding more? Elena thought about this. "I think I've been suffering because I want time to go backward," she admitted. "I want one more conversation, one more hug, one more chance to tell her I love her." "And this is natural," Master Rinzin said gently. "But it is also the source of your pain. The past is gone. The future is uncertain. All we ever truly have is this present moment. In this moment right now, are you breathing?" "Yes." "Is there air in your lungs, ground beneath your feet, a roof over your head?" "Yes." Then in this moment you have enough. This moment contains everything necessary for this moment. Suffering comes when we argue with what is, when we demand that this moment be different from what it is. Part 9. Forgiveness Practice. As Elena's time at the monastery extended into the second month, Master Rinzin introduced a new practice. Forgiveness meditation. Forgiveness, he explained, is not about condoning harmful actions or forgetting what happened. It's about releasing the burden of resentment from your own heart. Who are you holding resentment toward, Elena? Elena was surprised by her answer. "Myself," she said quietly. "I resent myself for not being enough to make my relationship work, not being enough to keep my grandmother healthy, not being enough to avoid this pain." The master nodded as though he had expected this. Self-forgiveness is often the hardest, he said. But consider this. Would you blame a leaf for falling from a tree in autumn? Would you blame the river for flowing downhill? You did the best you could with the awareness you had at the time. That is all anyone can ever do. He taught her a forgiveness practice. May I forgive myself for all the ways I have harmed myself through harsh judgment. May I forgive myself for being imperfectly human. May I remember that I am worthy of compassion, especially from myself. The practice was difficult. Years of self-criticism didn't dissolve overnight. But day by day, Elena felt the tight fist of self-blame beginning to loosen. Part 10. The Story of the Oak and the Reed. During a particularly difficult meditation session, when Elena felt she was making no progress, Master Rinzin told her a story. There was once a great oak tree that prided itself on its strength. It stood tall and rigid, boasting that no storm could bend it. Nearby grew a humble reed, slender and flexible. One day, a terrible typhoon struck. The oak tree stood firm against the wind, refusing to yield. "I am strong," it declared. "I will not bow." And in its rigidity it broke and fell. But the reed bent with the wind, bowing low, nearly touching the ground. And when the storm passed, the reed straightened again, unharmed. Strength, true strength, is not rigidity. It is flexibility. It is the ability to bend without breaking, to yield without surrendering your core. Your grief is a storm, Elena. If you try to stand rigid against it, it will break you. But if you allow yourself to bend, to feel it fully, to move with it rather than against it, you will survive. And when the storm passes, as all storms eventually do, you will rise again. Part 11. Finding Joy Again. By the third month, something unexpected happened. Elena laughed. It started during the evening meal when Brother Tenzo told a silly story about a confused chicken that had wandered into the meditation hall. The laughter bubbled up from somewhere deep inside, and for a moment Elena felt guilty. How could she laugh when she had lost so much? But Master Rinzin, catching her eye, simply smiled and nodded as if to say, "This too is part of healing." Later, he explained, grief and joy are not opposites that cannot coexist. A heart can hold both sorrow and happiness, just as the sky can hold both clouds and sunshine. Honoring your grandmother's memory doesn't require you to be miserable forever. In fact, the greatest honor might be to live fully, to find moments of beauty and laughter, to embrace life with the same enthusiasm she showed. Elena realized she had been unconsciously believing that to stop grieving meant to forget, to betray the memory of what she'd lost. But that wasn't true. She could carry her grandmother in her heart while still opening that same heart to new experiences, new connections, new joy. Part 12. Preparing to leave. As winter began to yield to early spring, Elena knew it was time to leave the monastery. She had work to return to, a life to rebuild, relationships to mend. The thought no longer filled her with dread. On her last evening, Master Rinzin gave her a final teaching. "Everything I have taught you can be summarized in 3 simple practices," he said. First, meet each moment with presence rather than resistance. Second, treat yourself with the same compassion you would offer a beloved friend. Third, remember that impermanence is not the problem. It is simply the nature of reality. Suffering comes from forgetting this truth. He handed her a small stone, smooth and dark. "This is from the monastery garden. Carry it with you. When life becomes difficult, hold the stone and remember, you have already survived what felt unsurvivable. You have already discovered that you are stronger than you knew. You have already learned to carry grief and joy together. These truths don't change when you leave this place." Elena accepted the stone, feeling its weight in her palm. A good weight, grounding rather than burdensome. Epilogue. The return. Elena returned to her city, but she was not the same person who had left. She returned to her work, but with new boundaries and a clearer sense of what truly mattered. She reached out to old friends she had pushed away in her grief, making amends where needed. The pain of loss didn't disappear. Some mornings she still woke with that familiar heaviness, but now she had tools to work with it. She practiced breathing with her emotions rather than against them. She caught herself reaching for second arrows and, more often than not, managed to put them down. She allowed herself to bend with difficult days rather than demanding she be over it. She kept the stone from the monastery in her pocket. On particularly hard days, she would hold it and remember Master Rinzen's teachings. Presence, compassion, acceptance of impermanence. 6 months after leaving the monastery, on what would have been her grandmother's 85th birthday, Elena visited her grave. She brought flowers and sat on the grass, talking to her grandmother as she used to do. "I'm okay now, Grandma," she said softly. "It took time, and I had to learn some difficult lessons, but I'm okay. I carry you with me every day, not as a weight but as a light. Your love didn't end when you died. It's still here, still guiding me, still warming me." A breeze rustled through the trees, and Elena smiled. She stood, placed the flowers on the grave, and walked back toward her car. The sky was clear, the spring air was gentle, and her heart, though marked by loss, was healing, opening, learning to embrace life fully once again. She had learned that healing doesn't mean returning to who you were before. It means integrating your experiences, your pain, and your growth into a new, more compassionate, more resilient version of yourself. And that, she realized, was its own kind of peace. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings find peace. May all hearts heal in their own time, in their own way.